Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm David Knight. It's Tuesday, August 26, 2014, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, the push for national ID cards is on. Then, a white Marine falls victim to a black hate crime. And a Utah rep questions the use of militarized police. That's next on the INFOWARS Nightly News.
You can party a while, play with your iPhone, take drugs if you want, be a nihilist, eat, drink, and be merry, or you can decide to be part of the future and try to defeat this.
Well, not a day goes by that we're not being prepared for the executive amnesty of Obama. Today, we see Illinois Democrat Luis Gutierrez, who, if you remember, just recently went before La Raza, the racist group The Race, and said, we are going to stop the deportation of our people. Now he's saying that it's music to his ears, that someone would have a source at the White House that say that it's 5 million people that are going to be given amnesty. He said, let me say tomorrow, the next day, and all of this week, we're getting ready. Well, how is he getting ready? He says, so I've been going around meeting with major news organizations, newspaper editorial boards, columnists, and others here in Chicago. In other words, he's meeting with people that are going to shape public opinion. He's meeting with people who are going to propagandize the public and spin this in the way that they want to spin it. He said, together with all these news organizations and editorial boards and columnists, he said, we're going to prepare a model for the nation, because when 5 million people are allowed the opportunity to come out from under the shadows, what are they doing in the shadows, and into the light of day and get legalized. Hey, I thought they were undocumented. I didn't think they were illegals. He's admitting that what they're doing is illegal. Now, they also are saying that they expect Obama to make a move next week after he returns from Estonia and Wales. Now, the Mexican president is visiting America, and he's lecturing us on what we should do with our immigration laws. He was visiting Jerry Brown in California, and this is part of a 2-day trip through California, they say in Politico, to immigrant-friendly California. And of course, Jerry Brown is going out of his way to be friendly to the president and to illegal immigrants. He says it wasn't very long ago, this is Jerry Brown talking, governor of California, that the governor of California was outlawing driver's licenses for people who were undocumented from Mexico. That's not the law anymore, he brags. Wait a minute. Undocumented people were not getting licenses, but now we're going to give people that don't have any documents, that don't have any legal basis for a driver's license issued by the state of California. If they're Mexican citizens, let them get a Mexican driver's license. And Jerry Brown has the audacity to say that that's not the law anymore. Why does he care what the law is? He just looks the other way. Now, he signed a bill last year that it will enable the immigrants to get driver's licenses. And California voters, they note in Politico, voted in 1994 in Proposition 187 that immigrants who are in this country illegally would not get social services, things like health care or education. But of course, that was overthrown by our own courts, because our politicians, our courts, are going to ram through the North American Union and the welfare state, the Cloward and Piven strategy, regardless of what Americans want. Politico points out that Hispanics have now become a force to be reckoned with in California. They now make up the largest of any racial or ethnic group in the state, though their voter registration numbers still lag behind whites. Well, they're going to take care of that. They're going to grant them amnesty, they're going to give them driver's licenses, and they're going to let them vote, because that's what this is really about. It's about selecting the voters that are going to keep them in office and give them carte blanche for a socialist state. Now, this is what the Mexican president said as he lectured us on how we should allow people who are flaunting our laws to stay here. He says there's still states that have not evolved as much as California, that still skimp on recognition, and even worse, on the rights of immigrants, the rights of illegal immigrants. He said those who still believe and bet for the exclusion and the discrimination and the rejection of diversity, I only have one thing to say: the future, and a very near future, will demonstrate your ethical mistakes. So he spends this as exclusion, as discrimination, as a rejection of diversity. No, it's actually standing for the legal process that immigrants have traditionally gone through. It's actually standing for some control over our country, some control over the number of people that are going to be brought in, to see if they have the means, as every other country in the world requires, the means of their own support, to support their own family. But as they give driver's licenses to illegal aliens in California, American citizens are going to get national ID cards. This is a story from the Ron Paul forums. It's picked up on INFOWARS.com today. Propaganda alert. Without a national ID card, you may be banned from boarding airplanes as soon as 2016. Now, this is a case of a woman who is from Massachusetts. She was not allowed to enter a federal building in Washington this month because she only had a Massachusetts driver's license. And they're one of only 9 states that have not signed on to a new federal law called Real ID. And they point out in this article that if nothing changes, those people in those 9 states will even lose the ability to display their licenses in order to board a plane. See, if she had something from the Border Patrol that was a permiso, or if she had identification from the Mexican embassy, that would be fine. She could get on a plane with that. She'd probably go into federal buildings with no problem whatsoever. But she only has a driver's license from Massachusetts as an American citizen. That's not good enough. Now, they point out that Massachusetts and other places have refused to enact Real ID because it costs them millions of dollars, and those states are concerned about privacy. That's right. So are we. Now, they say that unless they adopt it, of course, they will soon find themselves banned even from White House tours next year and from commercial airplanes as soon as 2016. But who needs a stinking driver's license anyway? We're not going to be driving cars. The cars are going to be driving themselves. In another piece of news that we see coming out with increasing frequency, and of course, this is a story from the Washington Post. It's picked up on Drudge again. Every day, there's more stories about driverless cars, about autonomous cars, as they point out in this particular article. No, I think actually right now, you are autonomous. You are self-driving, not your car. These are robotic cars that are going to be driven by computers, and they are going to be controlled by the government. Now, in this particular case, the Washington Post reporter is driving around with someone who is going through the busy streets of Washington, D.C., and they said, many people don't really think that this is going to happen that soon. She said, swing a stick on the mall this summer and you'll hit a dozen skeptics who doubt that the streets of Washington, or any city for that matter, will ever be filled with cars that drive themselves. But the doubters may well witness that transformation in their lifetime, very likely sooner than they think. Now, before we talk about the time frame that they put in this article at the very end of it, she pointed out something that I think we ought to all step back and look at. She says, if this car, a silver gray Cadillac SUV that's converted to autonomous driving, if this car looked the least bit odd, she says, the Capitol Police would swarm after it with their machine guns. That's right. And in this paranoid police state that we now live in, do we really want to give total control, of our transportation to the government so that they will not only know everywhere we go, but be able to stop, divert, control our cars in any way that they wish to? Now, this is the time frame that these people are talking about, the person that took her around from Carnegie Mellon Institute. He said within the next 3 to 5 years, there'll be a highway pilot feature, for example, that'll allow you to get on the interstate and just drive from one city to the other, and it will take care of doing the interstate driving. After that, shortly, they will have the ability to start switching lanes and driving faster. Then after that, in another 3 to 4 years, look for traffic jam assistance capability. The car will take over you while inching through bumper-to-bumper traffic and alert you to take back control once it's clear sailing. No, actually, eventually you're not going to have a steering wheel. You're not going to have brakes in your car. It's just going to be the computer driving it. But this is what he had to say that I thought was interesting. He said the totally driverless version will happen sometime in the 2020s. Most people believe it'll be the very early 2020s. He said the whole process will be incremental. Isn't that the way we always lose our freedoms? He said more and more scenarios that we drive in will become automated, and one fine day, you've given up complete control, but you don't even notice. That's right. Former Senator Alan Simpson said that the loss of freedom isn't a slippery slope. It's going down a staircase. It's ever descending into tyranny. Now, people are going to be driven away from their cars with fines and with fees from the police. That's one of the techniques that they're going to use. But right now, we're seeing in many of the police departments that are out of control, we're seeing that they're doing the very same thing with their fees. Look at what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri, of course. This is from governing.com, and they say skyrocketing court fines are major revenue generators for Ferguson. Some say that Ferguson's increasing reliance on court fines to fund its municipal operations may have contributed to its residents' distrust in law enforcement and government. Well, I think it's also an indicator. Whenever the government views its citizens as cattle to be milked, it's not very long before we start seeing corruption and excessive force following. But look at what happened in Ferguson, for example. They point out that court fines now account for 1/5 of the total operating revenue of the city. 1/5 of their revenue. The St. Louis suburb of only about 21,000 residents took in more than $2.5 million in municipal court revenue last fiscal year, representing an 80% increase from just 2 years prior. Now take a look at this graph that's on this article right here at the bottom. You can see that it's kind of going along, there it is right there, and in just the last couple of years, it's skyrocketed. Now this is what an assistant professor to St. Louis University School of Law said. He described the court system in Ferguson and in certain areas of St. Louis. He said they function primarily as a revenue generator. They don't want to actually incarcerate people because it costs more money, so they fine them, he said. It appears to be a blatant money grab. Does that resemble the town that you live in? I've lived in many towns like that. It's a pattern of behavior. And of course, you're going to see them treating people with no respect when they rob you on the highway. He says from his time representing clients in Ferguson, he estimates that the court, which holds 3 sessions each month, heard 200 to 300 cases per hour on some days. That's right. It's just a revenue stream. Now, we have a congressman who is talking about demilitarizing the police, and it really underscores that this is a federal problem as much as it is a local problem. It's being driven by the feds. This is Representative Stewart, and he is seeking, according to the Deseret News in Salt Lake City, Utah, he is seeking to introduce a bill. The bill is the Regulatory Agency Demilitarization Act. He says it's a response to SWAT-style teams at various federal agencies, including the Bureau of Land Management. And he says this all started back with the Bundy standoff, when he realized that you have all these various agencies that essentially have their own SWAT teams. He says, I don't feel comfortable now in the wake of Ferguson taking advantage of that and trying to sell it by saying, look what's happening out in Ferguson, therefore come and support my bill. This, I think, underscores the fact that it is not just an urban issue. It's not a rural issue, like people were saying in the Bundy Ranch. It wasn't a case of what was happening there so much as with the laws, with the federal ownership of the land. Yes, that was an issue. But the real issue was the militarization of the police, the militarization of these regulatory agencies, the way they were treating people there. And in the same way, when you look at the urban environment, it's the issue of the way they're treating people. It's not just an urban or rural issue. It's not a white or a black issue. This is a national issue because it's being driven by the federal government. Now, he says that he introduced this bill following the standoff between heavily armed BLM agents and Nevada rancher Cliven Bundy and his supporters. He said, there is no reason, I don't think, that the Department of Education, the IRS, the FDA, or, pick a regulatory agency, needs what is essentially a SWAT team. Now, his bill will prohibit federal agencies who are not traditionally involved in law enforcement from purchasing machine guns, grenades, and similar weapons. This is authority that was granted to them, of course, by the Homeland Security Act. Yes, the Homeland Security Act of 2002 that fundamentally transformed America and not for the better. The Department of Education has already used a SWAT team to point loaded guns in the face of a family and drag them out on the front lawn face down because of a delinquent student loan. That's America, thanks to Homeland Security. Hopefully, he'll have some effect and get that turned back. Now, in more news from Ferguson and the police state, we see a white Marine beaten by a black mob in Michael Brown's revenge attack. Now, this incident actually took place in Mississippi, not in Missouri. I had a couple of white men who were told that they needed to leave the Waffle House because there was a group of black men upset about the killing of 18-year-old Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, and that the restaurant wasn't a safe place for whites. Now, they left, and they were followed by a group of 20 men, and when one of them came out of the restroom, he found that the other guy was being attacked. This fellow, David Knighton, who is a veteran from the Air Force, served in Afghanistan, he was attacked also. He suffered broken bones in his face, a blood clot in his right eye, and a cut over his left eye. The other